Everyone is looking for answers after a deadly mid-air collision happened in Washington, D.C. Wednesday night. An American Airlines jet carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew members collided with a Black Hawk Army helicopter carrying 3 American soldiers near the Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport in Washington, D.C. There were, unfortunately, no survivors. I cannot think of a more fitting location for this tragedy to have occurred, simply because of what Ronald Reagan did to the government and the FAA, and because of the fact, of course, that lawmakers have been warning for the past year, hey, this airport is massively overwhelmed. You might want to stop, adding more flights into it. Unfortunately, that did not happen. Now, the direct flight from Wichita's Dwight D. Eisenhower National Airport to the Reagan National has only been offered for a short amount of time, the last year. So it was only a matter of time that there was a tragedy that involved these flights, okay? And no doubt this is a tragedy. Again, this flight, the commercial flight, so far no survivors, as I mentioned. From a group that included youth figure skaters, coaches, and family members. Again, rescuers spent the night searching the dark, freezing waters of the Potomac River when the plane fell after the collision. And as of this morning, there's probably more now, but 28 bodies had been recovered from the crash site. Okay, likely more now, as I mentioned. There's a few hours last that I checked. And so, I mean, it's again, a horrible tragedy, right? My condolences to the family and the friends of those involved. But what happened? And that is the question, right? What, if anything, could have prevented this from happening and might prevent a future tragedy? We're not going to know until there's an investigation, okay? That said, you could argue that this new administration did not help matters. And that is not to say that Donald Trump is at fault, at least not entirely, okay? Now, of course, there were some recent actions that he took that took an already problematic issue, okay, and made it worse. And so I'm not going to do the thing where it's like, oh, it's Donald Trump's fault, right? And the Donald Trump thing of saying, oh, it's DEI, that's the fault. No, I'm not going to do that either. This is not the fault of woke. It's not the fault of black people, okay? Because that's what he means by DEI. No, this is actually the fault of several administrations and massive amounts of lobbying, the corrosive influence of money in politics and how it kills people, okay? So let me get into the details of this, right? So look, the airport was already overwhelmed with traffic during the last year. This is before Donald Trump got into office. In fact, according to a report in The Lever, lawmakers brushed off safety warnings amid mid-flight near misses and passed an industry-backed measure designed to add additional flight traffic at the same D.C. airport where the January 29th disaster unfolded. The legislation was supported by lawmakers seeking more direct flights to their home states. That I can understand, all right? Because it's like, hey, I got to go home, right? I want a direct flight. I get it. But it was also supported by airlines eager for expanded routes, which means more profits, all right? Now, this was also opposed by other lawmakers who asserted the airport was already overstressed by the flight volume in the capital region's busy airspace. Now, they happen to be correct, all right? People like Representative Don Beyer, Democrat of Virginia, said the bill just proposed, this was the previous legislation, 2023 and 2024, by the way, would go far beyond past attempts to expand slots at Reagan Airport, dangerously overloading the airport's operational capacity to benefit one airline, which happened to be Delta, okay? Now, this is what Beyer told Washington Post at the time. Now, the measure's sponsor, however, Representative Burgess Owens of Utah, was like, that criticism? Oh, come on, man. That's fake news. Everything is going to be fine. What's the worst that could happen if we just keep cramming more flights in? Well, last night, we saw what could happen and what did happen. Now, in 2023, that bill was voted down. Less than a year later, a similar provision was added to a 2024 Federal Aviation Administration reauthorization bill. Now, this time, people who opposed it were people like Senator Tim Kaine and Ben Cardin. And they were saying, hey, this is going to create problems. Maybe we should not cram more flights in. But it didn't matter. This time, it passed on a bipartisan basis, thanks to lobbying on the part of Delta and something called the Capital Access Alliance. That's an industry group, okay? And President Joe Biden had signed it into law. And this is just one of the newest, most recent additions to an airport that has already seen a lot of additions to it when it comes to flight traffic. For example, 2000, 2003, and in 2012, okay, these flights were expanded to the Reagan Airport. In fact, look, the 2012 expansion, was supported by Trump's new transportation secretary, Sean Duffy, a guy who was on The Real World. So, well, now he's getting a taste of the real world. What happens when there's a real world tragedy, okay? And of course, as they were expanding more flights, they were simultaneously cutting staff. In fact, a 2023 Transportation Department report found that the staffing levels for air traffic controllers had declined by 10% from 2013 to 2023, and that the Federal Aviation Administration, quote, continues to face staffing challenges and lacks a plan to address them. And in May of 2024, the Federal Aviation Administration estimated that it still needed to hire roughly 3,000 more air traffic controllers nationwide to meet demands. Oftentimes, there's like one traffic controller on the job at the time. There have been towers that have shut down because that controller had to use the bathroom. That's how dangerously understaffed these FAA towers happen to be. And that was then, all right? This is now, where you have the Trump administration coming in and trying to cut the number of controllers, okay, in order to shrink the size of government. There are towers now that don't have any. They're just gone, okay? Not there. Not who's directing the traffic. Turns out nobody. Okay? And they're still like, we got to shrink government. We're spending too much money on government. Well, this is government. And of course, the reason they want to shrink government is so they can give tax cuts to themselves. Okay? In fact, it's gotten so bad that the remaining controllers, okay, have received emails for that alleged buyout that Musk and Trump had offered, okay, which not even a real buyout, okay. So I mean, look, and I told you I'm not going to blame Trump for all of this, obviously, but Trump has done some very bad things since getting into office. A day after he took over, Trump fired the heads of the TSA, the Coast Guard, and the Aviation Security Advisory Committee, whose job is it to examine safety issues at airlines and airports. Gee, it seems like we could really use that right about now. You know, some safety. Not only that, but the FAA currently has no leadership thanks to Elon Musk, the president, co-president, whatever you want to call him. He wanted this previous FAA administrator kicked out, and he got his way. Administrator Michael Whitaker was forced out under pressure from Elon Musk, who had demanded his resignation back in September for proposing fines of more than $600,000 for SpaceX over what? Safety concerns, according to a report in the Daily Beast. So, I mean, look, there's blame to go around, all right? Certainly for Trump, certainly the predecessors to Trump and Republicans, but also Democrats. This is a bipartisan problem. But it's actually less about the parties themselves. So don't get hung up on that, right? This is more about the corrosive influence of money in politics. The industry groups, trade groups have been lobbying. Add more flights, reduce regulations. All right. Fire air traffic controllers. We don't need them. We'll be fine. Again, politicians from both parties voted to increase the flights, even though there were not enough flight controllers to handle it. But again, they were like, it's fine. It's fine. And we don't need to hire any more because, they're government workers, and we don't need more government workers. No, they're just taking off the dole. They're sucking off the teat. So we got to get rid of them. We got to save money. Doge has got to save some money. I mean, look, the Republican Party lobbyists, and again, they lobby both sides, but, they're especially effective at lobbying Republicans. They're like, don't hire more workers. Don't hire more workers. And the Democrats will go along with it. All of what happened is the result. It's not like we didn't see this one coming, okay? There have been other near misses at this particular airport in recent years. That's why the 2023 bill failed, because there was a near miss where this almost happened. But now it did. It was only a matter of time. There was a bad situation. It was set up to be a bad situation. And it was made worse by the lack of oversight, the lack of leadership, and plainly the lack of labor, which was all made possible by industry lobbying, shrinking of government, and deregulation. It's what the industry wanted, though. It's what the industry wanted. Which is why this is just another example of how money in politics, how lobbying kills people. Billionaire Elon Musk is considering filing some lawsuits against people who called him out for doing a Nazi-like salute during Trump's inauguration. So now first up, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. So he went on MSNBC and said that, of course, everybody saw this. Yeah, it's a Nazi salute. Now, conservative influencer Robbie Starbuck had posted a video of him on X saying that, okay? And here's what Starbuck said himself. Creepy Tim Walz says, of course, Elon did a Nazi salute. I hope Elon sues him for all he's worth. He responded to that. Elon did. I think I will. Tim Walz is a creepy clown. Okay, so I love the projection here, okay, because I talked about Tim Walz during the election. Literally, there's nothing creepy about him. He's super nice Midwestern guy, okay, who, called conservatives weird because they are, okay. I mean, it's not like Tim Walz that offered a woman to buy a woman a horse in exchange for an erotic massage. You know what that was? That was Elon. Okay, this is at least according to allegations from a former SpaceX flight attendant, one of the many who are suing him for things like sexual harassment. Okay, the alleged sexual harassment is like 8 former workers say, yeah, there was a frat boy atmosphere here, lots of sexual harassment, basically a hostile work environment. That appears to be a bit creepy, okay? The way that Elon Musk runs things, the way that he talks about certain things, especially like, we're got a population problem. We need to have more. We need to have more babies. I will offer my sperm to any woman, who wants to have my babies. Like, you don't see that as creepy? Because that's creepy. Okay. I'm just saying, right? But let's get back to the salute here, because that's what matters. I'm going to say it. Looks kind of Nazi to me. I mean, that would, of course, be my opinion of this. My opinion, of course, being protected by the First Amendment, that whole freedom of speech thing that we're supposed to have in this country. Now, wait a minute. Of course, freedom of speech, as I've mentioned many times before, it only protects you from the government coming after you, for expressing an opinion, right? Well, yes. It doesn't protect for defamation, obviously. Now, that said, is Elon Musk a part of the government? Who even knows anymore, right? I mean, yes, I know he hasn't been elected to anything, but he was appointed by Trump to run a commission called Doge to talk about, federal spending. He's also staying at the White House. And this is while having some conflicts of interest, right? I mean, he's got a lot of government contracts. And so, and before Trump took office, he was being investigated for quite a few things, for bad business practices, as well as, these sexual harassment claims and things like that. He was under a lot of investigations for, some all this alleged stuff. All right. But now that's all gone. Weird. That's weird. And so it kind of feels like Musk's whole deal right now involves him like a kind of merging of corporation and state, where he's kind of at the head of it, or at least one of the top advisors to it. Now, what is the word for that? What is that? Okay, but aside from that, the Musk salute, right? That is at issue. Now, Musk and his defenders, they keep saying, well, oh, no, that's not a Nazi salute. It's a Roman salute. It's everything except for a Nazi salute. How dare you insinuate that it was? He was just touching his heart, and he was just giving his heart to the crowd. Okay, well, if it was so harmless, then why don't you do it? Why don't you do it in public? Show us. Show us what happens when you do it in public. Oh, right. Some of you actually already did. For example, you had Laura Smith. There's a politician from Pennsylvania who did it on video.
My heart goes out to you. Hope you're doing okay.
And then, oops, ended up resigning from her position as a supervisor in Tawamanson Township. That's not all. Then you had Father Calvin Robinson of the Anglican Catholic Church doing it.
So God bless all of you for what you're doing. Please keep doing it. I hope that I can encourage you, and my heart goes out to you. God bless.
Oh, but you don't understand. He was doing it off to the side. So that doesn't really count as a Nazi salute. You have to do it in front of you, you see? Look at that smile. That's the smile of someone who knows exactly what he's doing. And look, last month, Robinson had a neo-Nazi guest on his podcast who said, and I quote, "Judaism is a pernicious evil." I don't know, it sounds kind of Nazi to me. But he swears he's not a Nazi. No. He just really likes Christian nationalism. Now, that said, the ACC, they saw that and was like, that's not good. It's not a good look. They put out this statement. Approximately 3 p.m. today, members of the College of Bishops, ACC, were made aware of a post made on X showing the end of a speech made by Calvin Robinson at the National Pro-Life Summit in Washington, D.C. And he closed his comments with a gesture that many have interpreted as a pro-Nazi salute. Interpreted. While we cannot say what was in Mr. Robinson's heart when he did this, it's such a mealy-mouthed statement. His action appears to have been an attempt to curry favor with certain elements of the American political right by provoking its opposition. Mr. Robinson had been warned that online trolling and other such actions, whether in service of the left or right, are incompatible with a priestly vocation and was told to desist. Clearly, he has not. And as such, his license in the church has been revoked. He is no longer serving as a priest in the ACC. Furthermore, we understand that this is not just an administrative matter. The Holocaust was an episode of unspeakable horror enacted by a regime of evil men. We condemn Nazi ideology and anti-Semitism in all its forms, and we believe that those who mimic the Nazi salute, even as a joke or an attempt to troll their opponents, trivialize the horror of the Holocaust and diminish the sacrifice of those who fought against the perpetrators. Such actions are harmful, divisive, and contrary to the tenets of Christian charity. Finally, we pray that God will give us the grace to lay aside our unhappy divisions, and we commend our nation, ourselves to his almighty protection. I don't know where that accent came from, but I get into preacher mode. I'm sorry. It happens. Okay. But like, all right. So this is the like third or fourth church this guy was kicked out of. So quite a track record, right? Now it's important to understand that the ACC is nowhere near a liberal denomination. They're extremely socially conservative. Okay. And yet this was a bridge too far for them. I guess it's exactly what it looks like. Okay. But what does it matter? Everyone knows what this means. All right. Everyone can see with their own eyes what the salute is. All right. This game of doing it and then playing coy. Nobody's buying it. All right. But it is a way for them, I think, to try to bring it into the mainstream. And it has worked. Whether or not it's a joke, it has worked. You've got conservatives everywhere. They're either doing it or they're defending doing it because of a billionaire. And of course, the cherry on top here is the idea of then Musk suing people for correctly calling out what that is. What we're seeing in front of our very eyes. I mean, we see it. You're trying to gaslight us. Ain't gonna work. But it's not just about gaslighting, too. What they wanted to do is to scare people into submission with litigation or the threat of litigation. Why? Because they want to silence people. Ironically, destroying their free speech. I thought this guy was Mr. Free Speech. No, of course not. Of course not. I believe the overall goal here is to do that, is to intimidate people. And you know why? Because fascism is only able to thrive when the majority is too afraid to challenge it, when they have been cowed into compliance. All right? So I say, hold the line, keep calling it out for what it is, and most importantly, keep fighting. An inspector general at the USDA has defied President Donald Trump's illegal order firing all inspectors general. According to Reuters, Phyllis Fong, a 22-year veteran of the department, was escorted out of her office by security after she refused to comply with her firing by the Trump administration. She had earlier told her colleagues that, hey, I'm going to stay. Okay? This is after the White House had illegally terminated her on Friday, and she said that she did not believe the administration had followed the proper protocols. In an email to colleagues on Saturday, reviewed by Reuters, she said the Independent Council of the Inspectors General on Integrity and Efficiency has taken the position that these termination notices do not comply with the requirements set out in law and therefore are not effective at this time. So she was saying, you didn't actually fire me. All right. You got to do it the right way or else I'm coming in. And that's exactly what she did. And look, there's a process here, right? She's right. The president's supposed to notify Congress in writing 30 days before removing or transferring an IG from office their substantive rationale for that removal or transfer order. Okay? So, yes, the president does have the power to remove them, but only if they have good reason for it. You need a detailed case and specific reasons to do this. And Trump doesn't have them. I mean, what would be a good reason then? For example, if for some reason they couldn't carry out their mission, whether it be like, oh, they're compromised. That could be one. Or they might just be like too old or something like that, where, they're mentally unfit for it. Something like that. Or they have a health issue or whatever. That would be a good reason, okay? Plenty of good reasons. That said, Trump doesn't have those reasons. But Congress needs to know, if you have one, what these reasons are. And they cannot be vague statements. They have to be very specific. Now, what do I mean by vague? Well, take this example. This is what Trump's rationale is these rogue partisan bureaucrats have been relieved of their duties in order to make room for qualified individuals who uphold the rule of law and protect democracy. Rogue partisan bureaucrats. They're rogue and partisan. That's why I got to get rid of them. Really? Really? For one, this lady is a George W. Bush appointee. Okay? Rogue and partisan. Partisan for who? George W. Bush? Insane, right? No, the real reason that she was fired, and a lot of these inspectors general, is because Trump wants to replace them with loyalists. Now, specifically, though, there was some additional animus here coming from friends of Donald Trump, like Elon Musk. All right. In 2022, the Inspector General's office for the USDA, her office, launched an investigation into Elon Musk's brain implant company, Neuralink. Yeah, you know, the company that wants to put chips in everyone's brain. Yeah. Well, they had some issues, okay, which prompted this investigation. Documents from the University of California, Davis, where Neuralink conducted monkey experiments from 2017 to 2020, revealed that the implantation of the company's device caused debilitating health effects in the animals, resulting in euthanasia. Animals experienced chronic infections, paralysis, swelling in the brain, loss of coordination and balance, and depression. That last one seems to be, a little less severe than the others, but nonetheless, not good. Now, his company was also under investigation in 2024 for lying to investors about this, right? About the viability of Neuralink. You know what happened to that investigation?
Bing, 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 boom. It's gone.
Now that Elon Musk is ostensibly the president of the United States, president, co-president, doesn't matter. He's got a lot of influence here, and he's throwing it around. So, of course, yeah, very likely that this is retaliation for her daring to investigate Musk, who pumped about $250 million into Trump's re-election campaign. And by the way, he also had bought Twitter and used that to help promote Donald Trump while burying left voices. Okay. And so, yeah, Donald Trump owes him a lot for keeping him out of prison, essentially, for his victory in this election. And so he's doing everything that Musk wants him to. Firing all the people that dared to investigate him for his companies. Okay. And he was facing a lot of investigations, whether it be sexual harassment, having a culture of, again, sexist behavior at these different companies, as well as stuff like Neuralink with lying to investors, etc. And so, yeah, he was facing a lot, and now they're gone. That's what $250 million will buy you. And that's why being the richest man in the world, pretty nice gig, if you can get it. So, retaliation. But look, the thing is, her removal actually couldn't happen at a worse time for average people. The USDA, which is now pretty much leaderless, all right? And there's no inspectors general now. They're supposed to be monitoring the bird flu, which is killing tens of thousands of chickens, okay? Causing egg prices to go up. It's already killed a person in Louisiana. But now they really can't do their job either, okay? So she gets removed forcibly from her office, and now I guess that frees up Trump to put in someone who is a loyalist, who will not actually investigate the things that matter, and will probably just make way for people like Musk and other corporate CEOs to be able to do whatever the hell they want. That is, of course, unless Congress gets off their ass and actually starts asserting their powers, because this was an illegal firing. They can't do this. Now, of course, it's shameful, but not surprising that most Republicans, save for a few that have spoke out, have been more or less silent, though. But what's worse than that, because we expect that from Republicans, but Democrats, where's your fight? You haven't really put up any resistance. Unlike this lady who was, again, a George W. Bush appointee, who said, you know what, you want to make me leave? Make me. Make me. You're going to have to drag me out of the office to get rid of me. And that's exactly what they had to do. But you know what? It's little acts of resistance like that that make a difference in fighting fascism. Look, Donald Trump and the people behind Project 2025, right? They want to steamroll all over the rules, the laws, and norms we have in government in order to get their way, which is, of course, to take power. They can only do so, though, if they're allowed to. Look, Trump's breaking laws, okay? Breaking norms, okay? You know what? I think it's time for the people to actually enforce those laws. I know. Oh, my God, I can't do that. It was the president. What can we do? Remember, we're going from an administration that was like, the parliamentarians said no when it comes to raising the minimum wage. We can't do it. We can do nothing. We can do nothing. We're going from that to the steamroll. We're breaking all those laws, norms, procedures, everything. And now those same people were like, there's nothing we could do against the parliamentarian, are now saying, well, there's nothing we could do against Trump for breaking those laws, rules, and norms that, that stopped us. What can we do? Look, the fact that we're even in this mess in the first place is because of the failure to enforce the laws against Donald Trump, who is a criminal. He is a felon. But look, it's not too late. All right. I know everybody thinks it's too late now. He's in power. What can we do? No. You have to have people that are willing to stand up for the rule of law and to not allow Trump and his goons to ignore it. Especially if it's only to benefit Elon Musk's desire for vengeance. How dare you investigate me? No, there are people in the government, government workers, that can challenge Trump. There are still guardrails if you're willing to actually stand up. A Capitol rioter who was pardoned last week by President Donald Trump has ended up right back in prison. Emily Hernandez, Missouri, gained some fame on the right for holding up the broken sign bearing then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's name during the January 6th Capitol riots. Now, she ended up turning herself in to federal authorities in 2022 after being identified as one of the rioters, but was sentenced to about 30 days in jail, okay? So she wasn't involved in any of the violence, right? But was there at a place where she wasn't supposed to be, okay? Now, Hernandez was among 1,500 rioters pardoned by Trump last week. So, wait, how did she end up back in prison then? She served her time, right? Well, turns out that 6 days before Hernandez was scheduled to plead guilty to the misdemeanor charge of entering and remaining in a restricted building, she was involved in a fatal car accident. Hernandez had gotten drunk and was driving the wrong way in the eastbound lanes of Interstate 44 when she crashed into an SUV, which claimed the life of 32-year-old Victoria Wilson. Her husband, Ryan, was seriously injured in the crash, could no longer walk without a cane. So serious damage, right? So now Hernandez had a blood alcohol content of about 0.20 after the crash, which is more than twice the legal limit. A Franklin County judge sentenced Hernandez to 10 years for Victoria Wilson's death and 7 years for Ryan Wilson's injury. Judge Ryan Helfrich said, probation is not appropriate given the nature of what happened. Now, during her sentencing, she had said, what I did was ungodly, and I will live with that shame for the rest of my life. I'm sorry for what I did, and if I could take it all back, I would. Okay, so here we go. Another Capitol rioter ending up back in prison for things that she did. In this case, it was afterwards, okay? But here's the thing about her. Anybody could make this mistake, right? Drinking and driving is a serious problem, right? And alcoholism is a problem. And it could affect anyone. Now, I don't know if she had been drinking on January 6th or not. Could explain some things. But nonetheless, all right. Overall, her legal problems, though, are not as bad as some of the other Capitol rioters who are headed back to prison that I have talked about. Now, as I mentioned, she didn't get any involved in any violence on that day, but some of the others who were pardoned did. For example, I've got a few. Matthew Huddle. But look, before I get to that, I do got to note that while many did not have a criminal record prior to January 6th, there were some that did. NPR has identified dozens of defendants with prior convictions and or pending charges for crimes including rape, sexual abuse of a minor, domestic violence, manslaughter, production of child sexual abuse material, and drug trafficking. So I mentioned Matthew Huddle, right? Matthew Huddle was shot and killed by a law enforcement officer. Huddle has an extensive criminal history that demonstrates a pattern and practice of disrespecting and disobeying the rule of law, which is consistent with his actions on January 6th, prosecutors had argued. Huddle apparently had his own issues with alcoholism. Huddle's defense attorney attributed his criminal record to a history of extreme alcohol abuse. Okay, so that said, there are others that didn't have anything to do with alcohol, like, for example, Theodore Middendorf, who was accused by Illinois prosecutors of predatory criminal sexual assault of a child. Oh boy. Prosecutors sent a court filing obtained by NPR that Middendorf committed an act of sexual penetration to a victim that was, at the time, 7 years old, according to Indiana state records. Middendorf pleaded guilty to destruction of government property for striking a window at the U.S. Capitol with a flagpole on January 6th. He had not yet been sentenced for his role in the Capitol riot when the Justice Department moved to dismiss his case following Trump's order. So, yeah. Boy, we found the predators. And not a drag queen, okay? Peter Schwartz had a jaw-dropping criminal history of 38 prior convictions going back to 1991 when he assaulted police officers with pepper spray on January 6th, according to federal prosecutors. Some of those convictions, by the way, involved domestic violence. So, wife beating, basically. Now, that guy, of course, is free thanks to Donald Trump and his pardons. Okay. David Daniel, Mint Hill, North Carolina, he pleaded guilty to a charge of assaulting police officers on January 6th, but had not yet been sentenced. And, of course, thanks to Trump, he won't be. He is, however, facing charges of production of child pornography and possession of child pornography, which allegedly involves a prepubescent minor and a child under 12 years old. Enter Take of Texas also pleaded guilty to assaulting police officers with bear spray and a metal whip on January 6th and was sentenced to 6 years in prison. He was pardoned. He is now currently on the loose. According to the Harris County District Attorney in Texas, Take is wanted on 2016 charges of soliciting a minor online. Quote, this is District Attorney Sean Taylor. We are already in the process of tracking Take down. What did he do? He allegedly sent sexually explicit messages to someone he believed was a 15-year-old girl, but was in fact an undercover cop. This was part of his January 6th case. I mean, that's how they got these messages when they were investigating him for January 6th. They got his electronic devices, which showed these messages. Now, there was another, Casey Hopkins, He was convicted of rape in 2002, which resulted in a 7-year prison sentence, according to prosecutors' sentencing memorandum for his January 6th case. Edward Richmond Jr. literally murdered an innocent person while serving in Iraq. He shot a handcuffed Iraqi cowherder in the head. His rap sheet includes resisting arrest, driving under the influence, and domestic abuse. On January 6th, he had assaulted police officers with a baton while wearing tactical gear. So why am I going through these cases? Well, these are the people who are violent criminals who do not belong on our streets. Okay? Why did Donald Trump release violent criminals and rapists back into our communities? That should be the question on everyone's lips. Okay? Well, I have the answer. They served him once. And perhaps they will serve him again. That is unless they end up back in prison on these other crimes. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that every person involved in January 6th is like the rest of these people, right? Or that everyone who received a pardon is a bad person. No. Of course, you had former rioter, people like her, Patricia Hemphill. Okay? Here's what she said before the pardons went out. I don't want it. I did wrong. I did a crime. I did bad things, and I paid for my actions. That I have a lot of respect for that. Absolutely. But what we're talking about, again, is the worst of the worst. Being let out of prison, the rapists, the criminals, the violent people. Does anyone else see that's a problem? I mean, people with massive rap sheets that are a danger to the public, to the people's safety. And Trump will release them. And not only did he release them, but he called them patriots. That's a slap in the face. Okay? Absolute slap in the face. But, as I've said before, what do you expect from a fellow criminal? And maybe perhaps by releasing them, he believes that when it's time for me to try to take more power, I can count on these people because they did my bidding once and maybe they'll do it again. President Donald Trump is planning to send migrants to the infamous Guantanamo Bay prison camp, where people have been tortured and held without charge since 2002. Now, Trump announced on Wednesday that he will sign an executive order instructing the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security to prepare the U.S. naval base on Guantanamo to hold tens of thousands of migrants. He said at a ceremony to sign the Laken Riley Act, which is an immigrant detention bill. So this is a bill that basically allows ICE, if somebody is undocumented or you think you're undocumented and you think that they might have done a crime, nonviolent crime, whatever, stole a pack of gum, go get them. They can be arrested, charged, and held indefinitely. So that is horrific. And you know what? 12 Democrats allowed for that bill to go through. Yeah. So now, here's what he said, signing it. We have 30,000 beds in Guantanamo to detain the worst criminal aliens threatening the American people. Yes, that's right. Some of them are so bad, we don't even trust the countries to hold them because we don't want them coming back. So we're going to send them out to Guantanamo. Let me just say that I don't believe him at all. I don't believe them. Now, look, Gitmo has a migrant facility separate from the prison. But really, do you know if they're going to actually end up at the different facility, which already has in itself a lot of problems, a lot of complaints of terrible conditions. So this is what's going to happen. Look, the facility is apparently going to be repurposed to hold all these migrants, but that just means they're going to be out of sight, out of mind for the kinds of abuses I believe that he will allow these migrants to suffer through, whether or not they're dangerous criminal aliens or not. Okay. And look at the history of this place. There has been torture. There has been indefinite detention without charges or trials. All sorts of unlawful practices. This is essentially a concentration camp. No doubt this is what it's going to be. And it's not the only camp for these migrants. On Tuesday, the military announced that it will permit U.S. and Immigration Customs Enforcement to detain migrants at Buckley Space Force Base in Colorado. But this is different than in Colorado because, again, this is Guantanamo Bay. Now, if you were one of the people that was arguing that, well, look, Trump's not going to, he's just talking, right? He's not going to put people in camps. Well, what do you call this? What do you call this? It's a camp. It's a camp. Might even be a concentration camp. And I doubt that it's probably going to be holding the worst of the worst. That's what they argued that, was happening in Guantanamo all these years. That wasn't true. Out of the 780 detainees that were held there, only 15 remain, which kind of tells you that the 98% of the people who are supposed to be threats to the country, because they're only supposed to be there, they're dangerous terrorists or threats to the country. Turns out that the vast majority of them were not. And they're just held there without charges. A lot of these people were tortured into giving false confessions. Okay? So I'm not buying, based on that, this is needed to protect the American people against these dangerous criminal migrants. He keeps saying that. Oh, dangerous criminal, dangerous criminal, dangerous criminal. Oh my God, dangerous criminal. No, what this is going to be, in my mind, it's going to be a torture center for people who came into this country illegally. And yeah, maybe some of them did do like a crime. Okay, that doesn't mean you should torture them. But understand, this is what the far right wants. They want to torture people. They want to punish them in horrific ways. And Gitmo's the place to do it. Because it's happened before. But understand, these people who will go there, since they were taken from the United States, they do technically have constitutional rights. Unlike, of course, the war on terror people, right? Now, that means that lawyers will have to be allowed in, and there won't be as much secrecy. But, once again, it does require people to actually stand up and say, hey, these people have rights. They need to be respected. You need to follow the law. All right. Now, journalist and author Andrea Pitzer reacted to Wednesday's news on Blue Sky, writing, keep in mind that an executive order authorizing a detention camp isn't a done deal. That said, there's a reason I went to Gitmo twice while researching the last chapter of my global history of concentration camps, because that's what it is. Another observer pointed out that this move by Trump is not entirely unprecedented, saying, this is Jack Merkinson, an editor at The Nation. This move is as bipartisan as they come. Getting back to, the Laken-Riley Act, right, where you had 12 Democrats that joined in. Well, the Biden administration, according to Merkinson, was discussing using Guantanamo to hold Haitian migrants just last year. So, yeah. And by the way, it also had been traditionally used to house Haitian and Cuban migrants intercepted at sea before they could reach the United States. Now, in order to claim asylum, you actually have to be on U.S. soil. But if you're intercepted before you get to U.S. soil and then taken to Guantanamo, what can you do? What can you do? Can't claim asylum if you're not on U.S. soil. Sorry. So, I mean, that, again, this is a shameful piece of history that we have. Shameful in the fact that it wasn't ever shut down. And that it was opened in the first place under George W. Bush. But all right, George W. Bush opened it, but then you had Obama, who had the opportunity to close it, campaigned on closing it, but then didn't close it. And then, of course, Joe Biden Joe Biden also had the opportunity to close it. This is after the first Trump administration, and didn't close it. And actually was planning on using it himself. But now, this place is going to be used by Donald Trump, who is, in no doubt, planning to use it to inflict massive human rights abuses against people that he doesn't like. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell icon in order to get notified whenever a new video is released. And if you want to support independent, progressive media through this difficult time where it seems like everybody is shutting down, you can become a member on our YouTube page, you can become a subscriber on Facebook, or you can go to my Patreon. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf. Thank you.